would not be tough enough. But today we are going to start off with the influence on education, which is exciting to me as a teacher, of course. So, no comment, Sahil. All right. Now, one of the things that we talked about when we studied Islam is the importance of education. And this was an important aspect with Islam because you have to be able to read the Quran, to be able to know the Quran, to be able to go and fully submit to Allah. Because we know, of course, Islam means submission to the will of Allah, submission to the will of God. So education is muy importante. And we're going to see that this value of education is going to go and really permeate through Africa. I just think, we are blessed with the fact that we have students at Frederick Classical Charter School that have their heritage from West Africa. And guess what? Let me tell you, some of those parents are so on board with education. And I think some of you are probably thinking in your head, yeah, my mom is pretty hardcore about it. And there's reasons. Even if Islam isn't your family's faith, it transcended through the whole culture. So this was a big thing, this huge importance on education. That's why there were so many universities and schools being created there. And why, some of you are like, man, if my teacher even says something, even not a big deal, my mom or dad will flip out and make sure that I'm doing what I'm supposed to. Now, Timbuktu is going to be the center of learning and trade for West Africa for hundreds of years. It's going to be super duper important. It's kind of sad that today it's more of a punchline. Like I've always said, I don't know if you guys have Looney Tunes anymore, but like Bugs Bunny, whenever like Elmer Fudd was like chasing him with the gun, like trying to hunt him, he'd like trap him and ship him in a box in Timbuktu. Or when Wile E. Coyote was like chasing after Roadrunner would trick him and put him in a box and send him to Timbuktu. Because now it's kind of like this metaphor for being as far away as possible, but it once was like a cultural and educational hub. And so we have the studies in Timbuktu. They're going to focus on Islam. So it's going to be primarily religious instruction, just like how colleges and schools in Europe would have their primary focus on Christianity. We discussed this when we talked about the Byzantines as well. However, they would have all areas of study as well: geometry, algebra, to lots with math, but also the sciences, trying to give a really well-rounded education. And what I also love, I started talking about a book in the beginning of class because books are amazing. We have a lot of libraries being created at this time. Now, you don't need to write this final bullet, but so, for example, people would have their own personal libraries, which I know some of you in your homes do, which is awesome. But we have one of these medieval men being found to have 700 books. Now, you might say, 700? I've got at least that many in the Warrior series alone, because I know the Warrior series keeps on growing and growing and growing. Hopefully not at 700 yet. But remember, each of those books back then were incredibly expensive because, literally, Simon is copying each of those copies by hand. All right? They're using animal skin for the leather bound. So when you buy a fancy book today that's got that, yeah, that's what they all had right there. Paper was incredibly hard to come by. So these were incredibly expensive. So 700 books would be in our equivalent today of probably millions of dollars, which is pretty wild. And it just kind of shows how important education was for people to go and spend their wealth that way. I like books. So, how has it influenced language? Well, Arabic is now going to become the language of not only religion, but learning, commerce, and the government. I'm holding my fingers up and counting them off, and then I realized it was completely off camera. It's so weird teaching in front of this camera. I needed to just show all of me so you can see all of my goofiness. But anyways, although then I'm wearing blue jeans, which I never did except for Fridays at FCCS. And so we're not wearing ties. Now, people in their everyday speech would use their native languages. So, when Saya is talking to her mommy, she's going to talk in, whatever language she speaks. We'll pretend it's English. Actually, no, for Saya, we'll pretend it's Japanese because she knows all sorts of cool Japanese stuff. And, when she speaks to her friends, she's speaking Japanese to Blake. But if Saya and Blake are in school, they're going to talk to their teachers in Arabic. The books they're going to read are in Arabic. When Mide is working, he's using Arabic. But when he's at home, he's speaking, I don't know, let's say Mide speaks French. What do you mean like Minecraft? I'm not sure, Mia. I don't understand that comment, darling. All right, we'll let it go then. Now, one of the things that's going to be part of this reason is because, as we've talked about, and we're going to discuss further on when we get to the cultural legacy of West Africa, is that African languages, particularly West Africa, were oral traditions. They didn't write things down. So, for example, Blake is memorizing all of the stories and everything. She doesn't write it down. She doesn't write down notes. And it's one of those things that this is something we've lost as a society because we have the ability to write things down. We don't have to remember things. So we will find that societies that are oral have much better memories than the societies that are written down because, you can write it down, you can go look it up later. But because their languages were oral and not written, when Arabic came and Arabic was written, it naturally just became the language they used because they didn't have writing in their traditional languages. And what's going to be super interesting, this is going to create a habit where, especially in West Africa, people are going to know many, many languages. Now, you guys are ahead of the game because you have instruction in Latin, English, and Spanish, which is awesome. Americans are traditionally pretty ignorant of other languages, with the majority of Americans speaking only one. Some of you are amazing. Like I know how Mama Mia is bilingual. She can speak Spanish and English, which is amazing. And I know there are other students that we have like that speak other languages too. But compared to many places in West Africa, there are people who speak multiple languages. There's this video that I'm not going to show because I only have it on a DVD, and it's kind of hard to show DVDs through this. And it's just a clip that there's this man who we'll see in a later thing, which I will show, that he's in an African schoolhouse. It's the kids are in 4th grade, and he says, "All right, raise your hand if you speak 3 or more languages." Every kid's hand up. Raise your hand if you can speak 4 or more languages. And like 90% of the kids have their hands up. And like raise your hand if you can speak 5 or more languages. And half the kids still had their hands up because there are so many different languages. And just that's growing up. They knew, okay, in this situation I speak this language, in that situation I speak this language. And it's incredible. So this is just kind of goes on with the culture. Now, we talked about this, how Arabic in particular is important. So they had to read the Quran. We're kind of beating a dead horse right there. And what the great thing and the big improvement, the big advantage of all of this, so you definitely got to know this part right here, is Arabic allowed for a global culture back then and a global trade and communication. The scholars in Timbuktu, they could work on things that the scholars in Cordoba, Spain are working on, which could work on things that the scholars in Baghdad over in the Middle East are working on. So it's one of these things that you have more people able to work together. And of course, the traders that are in Indonesia, like way up in Southeast Asia, are able to interact with the traders that are in the Swahili states, which are able to interact with the traders that are in Cordoba. I mean, it's incredible. This is pretty amazing. And it's kind of like how today English is the language of trade. So many people learn English because a lot of the business is done in English. Back then, it was Arabic. For one period in time, it was Italian. That's why when any of you who do music, you'll see words like fortissimo and pianissimo. That's Italian because at one point, Italian was the language. So, cool, huh? right, we're getting close to the end. All right, I feel like we've done a lot. I might save a little bit. We'll find out. All right, now, one of the things that we're going to see for the indigenous religions, we often had many shrines devoted to nature and our ancestors. These are going to be converted into mosques. And we're going to see that prior, the construction was with mud and wood. And what we're going to see, though, is Mansa Musa is actually going to bring Spanish architects. So we're going to see some Spanish architectural influences in Timbuktu and other places of former Mali as he builds mosques and homes. And one of the cool things that winds up getting brought over is the idea of scaffolding, rectangular houses, flat roofs, drain pipes. Honestly, really, these last two bullets are, and honestly, actually, probably this last bullet is the main thing to really get from here. You can omit the rest. Like I talk too fast, and then we've got like this weird like silence. Isha smiles. She's like, "Yeah, weird is definitely a word I would use to describe you." And she shook her head yes. Oh my goodness. So yep, rectangular houses, flat roofs, drain pipes. Got to go to the art. All right, final slide for the day. Now, what's pretty interesting is actually African art and African art and Islamic art had similarities to begin with. Both styles use a lot of geometric patterns, and after Islam came, this becomes one of the predominant styles that we have. One of the cool things is we're going to see this in a lot of textiles, and we're going to talk more about the different textiles of West Africa next week. Calligraphy was something that was going to be very popular in Islam. And of course, calligraphy is something brought in by Muslims since they didn't use writing prior in West Africa. And my screen just shifted. That's weird. What was the last bullet on the last slide? It was talking about, square roofs, drain pipes, scaffolding. You can skip this bullet right here, but typically the calligraphy, just like for Islamic art, was going to be, words from the Quran or, And finally, Arabic robes become very popular. However, they don't do them the Arabic way. Because if you remember when we saw that Bedouin trader before, his robes were like all gray and very plain. Whereas we're going to see this adapted to in West African culture, these robes wind up being bright and colorful and cool designs and everything like that. So we're going to see that influence as well. And that is going to be our notes for the day. Let me stop recording. Do we have any